Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The room was alive with laughter and clinking glasses, the glow of golden chandeliers reflecting off the polished wooden floor. But Jack Carter stood there, rigid in his marine dress blues, eyes locked on his brother's fiancée and the woman he had called his wife. The microphone in his hand felt heavy, a weapon he was about to unleash. "Tonight, I want to make a toast," Jack said, his voice even, carrying over the music and chatter. The room quieted, all eyes on the returning Marine. He paused, letting the silence stretch until the weight of it settled over them like a thick fog. "My brother is about to start a new chapter of his life," Jack continued, his voice calm but edged with something cold. "And I think it is only fair to start this new chapter with the truth." His gaze flicked to Emily, her smile frozen, eyes darting nervously. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Jack's fingers tightened around the microphone, knuckles white. He cleared his throat. "You see, I have always believed in loyalty, in honor, and I thought I was surrounded by people who believed the same." Another pause. Emily's breath caught, a flicker of panic in her eyes. He took a deep breath, scanning the faces of friends and family who had gathered to celebrate love. "But tonight, I need you all to know, the woman I married betrayed me. And not just with any man, but with someone I called my brother's best friend." Gasps erupted around him. Jack's heart pounded, but his voice never wavered. "Emily and Nick, they thought I would never find out. They thought my duty overseas would keep me blind." He let the words hang in the air, thick and sharp. "They forgot one thing. I am still a Marine, and I finish what I start." The room was dead silent. Emily's face was pale, Nick's jaw clenched. Jack looked at them both, his eyes clear, unyielding. "So here is my toast to truth, to betrayal, and to the day you finally pay for every lie you ever told." He lowered the microphone. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. Then, slowly, he asked, voice low and steady, "Are you ready to face the truth tonight? Wait, if this story gave you chills or made you think twice about trust, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button to support the channel, and subscribe if you never want to miss another jaw-dropping tale. We drop new stories every week that'll leave you speechless." To everyone who's already subscribed, sending you heartfelt love and thanks. Join the family, because here, every story hits different. Now, let's dive back into the story. A month before the engagement party, Jack Carter stepped off a military transport plane and into the cold Seattle air. He was home, but something inside him felt restless, like he was coming back to a life he no longer recognized. Emily met him at the airport with a bright smile and open arms. "Welcome home, Jack," she said, her voice soft and sweet. She kissed him like nothing had changed. But Jack felt the distance in her touch, a coldness she could not hide. They drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. Emily talked about the engagement party, her dress, the catering. Jack listened, nodding, but his mind was somewhere else. Her laughter was forced, her words too rehearsed. At home, everything was in its place. The photos on the wall, the cozy throw on the couch, like a perfect snapshot of family life. Jack tried to settle back in, but something was off. He noticed how Emily's phone never left her side, how she turned away when she typed a message. One night, he watched her from the doorway as she typed furiously, her face lit by the glow of her phone. She jumped when she saw him. "Just checking the party details," she said, too quickly. Jack said nothing, but his gut twisted. At breakfast, she laughed at his jokes, but her eyes were tired. Jack forced a smile. "You sure everything is good, Emily?" he asked. She nodded, but her fingers drummed nervously on her coffee cup. He tried to shake the feeling, telling himself it was just the strain of returning home. But he could not ignore the Marine instincts that had kept him alive overseas. He noticed the small things, her sudden late nights out, her phone always face down. He started to wonder if the woman he had married was still the same. Every night, he lay awake, replaying their conversations, searching for the truth. The cracks in their life grew wider, and Jack felt himself slipping away from the woman he had once trusted completely. Days turned into weeks, and Jack tried to find his rhythm back in civilian life. But the unease inside him grew. Every morning, he watched Emily rush out the door with barely a goodbye, her perfume lingering in the air long after she was gone. One evening, Jack sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the mail. A receipt fell out of Emily's purse. Dinner for two at an expensive downtown restaurant. His name was nowhere on it. His chest tightened. "Emily, where did you go last Thursday night?" he asked when she got home, trying to keep his voice calm. She froze, then forced a smile. "Oh, I went out with the girls. You know, party planning stuff." She busied herself in the kitchen, but Jack's eyes never left her. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. But the doubt gnawed at him. That night, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as Emily slept beside him. The distance between them was a canyon he could not cross. In the morning, Jack watched her from the window as she got into her car. She laughed at a text on her phone, her smile real for the first time in days. But it was not for him. Jack knew he had to find out the truth. He had been trained to see through lies, to trust his instincts. And his instincts were screaming at him now. He spent hours poring over every detail, every glance, every word she spoke. The puzzle pieces did not fit. He remembered how she used to look at him when he came home from deployment, like he was her whole world. Now, her eyes slid away from his. The woman he had loved was slipping through his fingers, and he knew he could not let it happen without a fight. "Emily," he whispered to himself that night, fists clenched. "What are you hiding from me?" Jack's brother, Mark, had always been the life of every party. His best friend, Nick, was no different, charming and quick with a joke. They had been inseparable growing up, a trio that seemed unbreakable. But now, Jack watched Nick through narrowed eyes, every word he spoke twisting in Jack's stomach like a knife. At a backyard barbecue a week before the engagement party, Jack noticed how Nick's eyes lingered on Emily. How Emily's laughter seemed too bright, too eager when Nick was near. It was subtle, just a flicker of something in her gaze, but Jack saw it all. "Jack, man, relax," Nick said with that easy smile, clapping him on the shoulder. "You look like you just got back from the desert." Jack forced a smile, his gut screaming that Nick was not the friend he once knew. Later that night, Jack cornered Mark in the kitchen. "How well do you trust Nick?" he asked quietly, his voice tight. Mark blinked, surprised. "Nick? He is my oldest friend. You know that." Jack nodded, but his jaw was set. "Yeah, I know. But people change. You ever see the way he looks at Emily?" Mark hesitated, then shook his head. "You are being paranoid, Jack. Emily loves you." Nick would never cross that line. But Jack's instincts would not rest. He remembered the way Emily's eyes had flicked to Nick, how her hand brushed his arm for just a moment too long. These were not the gestures of friends. These were the gestures of secrets. He started watching every interaction. Emily's hand on Nick's shoulder, the way they shared a look across the room. It was a dance, small movements that meant everything when you knew what to look for. One evening, he found them in the hallway at Mark's house, voices low. Emily jumped when she saw Jack. "We were just talking about the party," she said, her voice too calm. Jack said nothing, just nodded and walked away. But the image burned in his mind. Lying in bed that night, Jack felt the cold dread settle in his chest. "Nick," he whispered, his voice bitter. "You really thought you could take what is mine." The nights grew longer. Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Emily's breathing slowed beside him. The rhythm of her sleep was a taunt, peaceful, innocent, while his mind churned with images of her and Nick. Seattle's rain tapped at the window, a steady reminder that the world outside kept moving even as his own had come to a standstill. Jack's mind replayed every moment, every whispered conversation he had caught between Emily and Nick. He remembered how Emily's laughter had once been his favorite sound. Now it felt like a lie. He got up and paced the apartment, the floorboards creaking under his weight. He opened Emily's closet, her scent clinging to her clothes like a ghost. He wondered how long she had been slipping away from him, how long he had been blind. One night, he finally confronted her. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet but cold. "Are you hiding something from me?" She blinked, startled. "What?" "No, Jack, of course not." Her smile was too quick, her eyes too wide. Jack saw it all. He did not press further. He knew she would lie. He knew she would spin her web of words, and he would find nothing but excuses. So he let it go for now. Instead, he dug deeper. Every night, after she fell asleep, he searched. Her phone was locked, but he had learned enough in the Marines to get past that. Every time he found nothing but scraps, fragments of conversations, innocent on the surface, but dripping with unspoken meaning. He could not let it go. He could not pretend everything was fine. The Marine in him, the man who had survived combat zones and blood-soaked sands, knew that you never turned your back on danger. And right now, Emily was the biggest danger of all. In the cold glow of the streetlights outside, Jack clenched his fists. "I will find the truth," he told himself. "I am not going to be played for a fool." The rain kept falling, and Jack kept watching. The days blurred together, each one thick with tension that clung to Jack's shoulders like a weighted vest. He moved through the world on autopilot, his Marine training keeping him steady even as his mind spiraled. One evening, he came home early from a meeting with a fellow Marine buddy. Emily was not expecting him. He stepped into the kitchen and stopped cold. Emily was there, laughing into her phone, her face lit up with a smile that had not touched Jack in weeks. She saw him and jumped, her phone slipping from her fingers. "Jack, you are home early," she said, her voice too bright. Jack just looked at her, the silence stretching long between them. "Who was that?" he asked finally. Emily's smile faltered. Just a friend. From work." Her lie was smooth, practiced, but Jack saw the tremor in her hands. After she went to bed that night, Jack picked up her phone from the counter. Her password was her birthday. He had always known that. He unlocked it and felt his stomach turn at what he saw. Dozens of messages. Nick's name at the top of every thread. Sweet words, half whispers of love. Plans made for nights when Jack was gone. It was like a dagger straight to his gut. He sat down at the kitchen table, the glow of the screen washing over his face. He read every word, every promise she had made to another man. The betrayal burned in his veins. When he heard Emily stir in the bedroom, he put the phone down and sat there in the dark, his jaw tight. His mind was a battlefield. He had faced death in foreign deserts. But this was a different kind of war. Jack stared at the phone, his reflection in the black screen twisted by the light. "You forgot who I am, Emily," he thought. "I am a Marine. I do not run from a fight, and I am not going to let you win." The next morning, Jack was calm, his voice even as he kissed Emily's forehead. "Have a good day, sweetheart," he said softly. But inside, he was a storm waiting to break. Jack woke up before dawn, the Seattle rain tapping softly against the window as he sat in the dark kitchen, his coffee steaming in his hands. He had been trained to read every subtle shift in the wind, every flicker of movement in enemy territory. But this betrayal unfolding in his own home, it was a different battlefield altogether. Emily moved around the house that morning with forced casualness, humming softly as she poured her coffee. She caught Jack's eyes across the counter, her smile tight. "You have barely touched your breakfast," she said lightly, but there was an edge to her voice. Jack took a slow sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of his mug. "I am just not that hungry today," he said. His voice was calm, but inside, he was measuring every word, every blink of her eyes. She looked away first, her hand trembling just slightly. As she left for work, Jack's mind was already in motion. He pulled out his old notebooks, flipping through pages of tactics and observations. He knew how to gather intelligence without tipping his hand. He would be patient. He would not let emotion cloud his mission. He started small. He checked phone records when Emily was not home, noting every unfamiliar number and every suspicious timestamp. He watched how she would clutch her phone to her chest when she thought he was not looking. Each clue was another puzzle piece. One night, he watched her from the hallway as she talked on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "Yes, I miss you too soon," she whispered. Jack felt his gut tighten, but he forced himself to stay silent. This was the confirmation he needed. When she hung up, she jumped as she turned and saw him standing there. "Jack," she said, her voice too bright. "I was just talking to my mom." Jack just nodded, his face blank, but his mind was screaming the truth. She was lying. He turned and walked away, his heart pounding. He was a Marine. He would see this mission through to the end. Late at night, the apartment was silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Jack sat alone at the kitchen table, Emily's phone in his hand. He had waited until she was asleep, her soft breathing a mockery of peace. The passcode was her birthday, something she had never thought to change. The messages on the screen felt like poison. Words of love and longing, emojis that should have been his alone. Nick's name was there, line after line of digital seduction. Jack read them all, his jaw clenching tighter with every word. "You are the only one who understands me," Emily had written. "I cannot wait until Jack is out of the way again." The betrayal was like a knife in his gut, but he did not flinch. He read it all, every message another nail in the coffin of their marriage. He heard Emily stir in the bedroom, and he quickly locked the phone, placing it back exactly where he had found it. When she walked into the kitchen, blinking sleep from her eyes, Jack met her gaze evenly. "Could not sleep?" she asked, her voice soft, feigning concern. Jack forced a small smile. "Just restless," he said, "thinking about the party coming up. It is a big deal for Mark." Emily nodded, her eyes searching his face for any hint of suspicion. "It will be perfect," she said. "We will make sure it is a night to remember." Jack just nodded, the words echoing in his mind. "A night to remember," he repeated silently, his resolve hardening. She would never see it coming. After she went back to bed, Jack sat there in the dark, the glow of the streetlights washing over him. His mind was clear. He had the proof now. There would be no excuses, no lies she could spin to cover what he had seen. He leaned back in the chair, the metal of his Marine ring cold against his skin. "This is not just a betrayal," he thought. "This is war, and I know how to win a war." The next morning, Jack moved through the apartment like a ghost, every movement calculated and calm. Emily buzzed around him, her laughter forced, her eyes flicking nervously to his face. She was trying to keep up the illusion, but Jack saw the cracks. Over breakfast, he watched her pour his coffee, her hands just a little too shaky. "I was thinking we could take a trip after the party," she said brightly. "Just the two of us, some time away." Jack raised an eyebrow. "A trip? That is sudden." She shrugged, her smile too quick. "We need it, do not you think?" Jack just nodded. "Maybe," he said softly. But inside, he was done pretending. That evening, Emily went out for a planning meeting with Mark's fiancée. Jack knew better. He watched from the window as she pulled away, her phone already in her hand. He waited 10 minutes, then grabbed his jacket and left. He followed her at a distance, his Marine instincts guiding him. She parked downtown, stepping out in a coat that was too elegant for a simple dinner with friends. Jack's breath fogged in the cold night air as he watched her disappear into a trendy restaurant, one he had never been to. He waited outside, the minutes ticking by like a countdown. When she emerged, Nick was at her side, his hand brushing her lower back in a way that made Jack's blood run cold. They laughed together, oblivious to the storm brewing just yards away. Jack turned and walked away, every muscle in his body coiled tight. He had seen enough. There was no more doubt, no more hope, only the mission now, to expose them both. Back at home, he sat in the living room, staring at the engagement invitation propped on the mantel. "A night to remember," he said softly to himself, his voice calm. "You will get your wish, Emily." and I will make sure you never forget it." As the engagement party approached, Jack moved through the days with a quiet determination. Every moment he spent near Emily and Nick felt like holding his breath underwater, watching, waiting, knowing the truth but not yet ready to speak it. Emily fluttered around the apartment, her excitement for the party painted on her face like a mask. She spent hours on her hair, on her dress, on perfecting the lies she was about to sell to the world. Jack watched her from the doorway as she twirled in front of the mirror, practicing her smile. "Do I look all right?" she asked, her voice bright, her eyes searching his face. Jack forced a small smile. "You look perfect," he said softly. And for the first time, he meant it, she looked perfect in her deception. The night before the party, Jack sat alone on the couch, the soft hum of the television doing nothing to quiet the noise in his head. He could still hear Emily's laughter in that restaurant, still see the way Nick's hand had settled on her waist like it belonged there. He knew he could not pretend much longer. He took out a small box from his pocket, a medal his father had given him before his first deployment. "This is who I am," he whispered to himself. "A Marine, a protector. And tomorrow, I will protect my name, my family, and my honor." As Emily slipped into bed beside him that night, Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the vows they had made, the promises she had broken. He thought of the brother he had trusted, the friend who had turned on him. His heart was a storm of betrayal and cold, clear purpose. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. Tomorrow, there would be no more lies. Jack woke up early the morning of the party, the first light of dawn creeping through the curtains. The apartment was quiet, Emily still asleep, her breathing slow and even. Jack moved carefully, every motion deliberate as he packed away the last pieces of evidence he needed. He slipped on his dress blues, the uniform pressed and perfect. Every button and medal spoke of who he was, what he had fought for, what he would not let go without a fight. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror, he saw not just himself, but the mission ahead. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was a battle for his dignity, his pride. Emily woke up and watched him get ready, her eyes lingering on the crisp uniform. "You look so handsome," she said softly, reaching out to fix his collar. Jack held her hand for a moment, his eyes locking with hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. Inside, his mind was focused and cold. They drove to the venue in silence. The mansion on the hill was buzzing with laughter and music, every window glowing with warm light. Jack's brother, Mark, met them at the door, his smile broad. "Jack, you made it," he said, clapping him on the back. Jack managed a small smile. "Of course," he said. "Would not miss it." The night flowed around him in a blur of faces and laughter. Jack moved through the crowd, his mind razor-sharp. He watched Emily with Nick, every shared glance, every forced laugh that spoke more than words ever could. As the night drew on, Jack felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knew the time was coming. His fingers brushed over the microphone on the stage, feeling the cold metal. His pulse slowed, his training taking over. He had faced worse than this, and he would not back down now. He looked at Emily across the room, her smile bright as she charmed their friends. She had no idea what was coming. Jack took a breath. The mission was clear. Tonight, he would speak the truth. The air in the mansion was thick with laughter and the clinking of glasses as Jack slipped away to a quiet corner. In his hand, he held the small digital recorder, the one he had hidden in Emily's car weeks before. It was a simple device, but it held everything, the proof he needed to end the lies once and for all. He pressed play, listening again to the hushed voices that had haunted his nights. Emily's soft laughter, Nick's murmured promises. "He will never know," Emily's voice said, her tone low and breathless. "We just have to wait until he is gone again." Jack closed his eyes, the words a brand on his soul. He felt the anger rise, but he forced it down. He needed to be calm, controlled. The Marine in him knew that emotions were the enemy when the mission was this important. Emily appeared around the corner, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What are you doing back here?" she asked with a laugh. Jack slipped the recorder into his pocket, his face carefully blank. Just needed a moment to myself, he said. It is a big night. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. I am glad you are here, she said softly. It means a lot to Mark. Jack nodded, his heart hammering in his chest. Yeah, he said quietly. It means everything. As she walked away, Jack felt the weight of the recorder in his pocket like a secret weapon. He watched her melt back into the crowd, her laughter echoing across the room. She was so sure of herself, so certain that her lies would never see the light of day. But Jack had seen too much, endured too much, to let it stand. He straightened his shoulders, feeling the uniform stretch tight across his back. He was ready. Tonight, he would end this. The truth would be spoken, and the fallout would be hers to face. He looked up at the stage, the microphone waiting. Tonight, he thought, I will remind them all, I am still a Marine. The night air outside the mansion was cool, the city skyline glittering in the distance like a promise Jack no longer believed in. He stepped out onto the balcony, the murmurs of the party fading behind him. The recording in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole through his jacket, proof of every whispered lie that had stolen the life he thought was his. Jack leaned on the railing, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. He had faced death in foreign lands, but betrayal at home cut deeper than any bullet ever could. As he stared out at the lights of Seattle, he felt the calm before the storm, his breathing slow, his mind clear. He heard a door creak behind him and turned to see Emily step onto the balcony, her face half hidden in the shadows. You are missing the party, she said softly, her voice gentle, almost tender. Jack turned to her, his expression unreadable. I needed a moment, he said quietly. Sometimes, you need to clear your head. She moved closer, her perfume filling the air between them. I know things have been tense, she said, her voice breaking a little. I know you have been distant. Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on hers. Have I? He asked, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. Emily reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. I just want us to be happy again, she said, her voice trembling. Jack studied her face, searching for any sign of the woman he had once loved. But all he saw was a mask that would crumble tonight. He took her hand, his grip firm. Emily, he said softly, his voice steady. Do you have anything you want to tell me? Her eyes widened, just a flicker, and she shook her head. No, Jack, she whispered. Nothing. Jack let her hand fall away, his decision made. He would not ask again. Tonight, he would let the truth speak for itself. Jack walked back into the party, his mind a steel trap. He could feel the weight of every conversation, every hidden glance, like he was seeing it all through a sniper's scope. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, it was all background noise to the mission he had set for himself. Mark caught his eye across the room, raising a glass with a wide grin. Ready for the toast, brother? He called out. Jack nodded slowly, his lips curling in a faint smile. Yeah, he said. I am ready. Emily slipped in beside him, her arm around his waist, her smile bright and false. You will make it perfect, she murmured, her lips brushing his cheek. Jack turned to her, his eyes cold. I know I will, he said evenly. As the crowd gathered around the small stage, Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. He could see Nick in the corner, his laughter too loud, his eyes darting nervously every time they met Jack's gaze. Jack stepped up to the microphone, his heart steady, his mind clear. He looked out at the sea of familiar faces, family, friends, people who had always believed in him. And he thought, they deserve to know who she really is. He started slow, his voice calm and warm. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he said, his eyes sweeping the room. It means more than you know. A ripple of smiles and nods answered him, but he did not smile back. You all know me, he said softly. You know my life has always been about loyalty, about standing by those who stand by you. He paused, letting the silence stretch, feeling the tension like a live wire in the air. Emily shifted beside him, her hand tightening on his arm. But tonight, Jack said, his voice steady and cold. I have to speak the truth. Because I am still a Marine, and I do not let betrayal slide. The room fell silent, the only sound the quiet echo of his words. A hush swept over the party, the kind of silence that seemed to pull the air from the room. Jack looked out at the faces of people he had grown up with, people who had watched him leave for war and welcomed him home. Now, he was about to show them a battlefield of a different kind. Emily's face was pale, her smile frozen. Jack, she whispered, her voice shaking. What are you doing? Jack did not answer her. He turned instead to the crowd. Tonight, I need to tell you all something. Something you deserve to know. Nick stepped forward, his face a mask of forced calm. Jack, man, this is not the time, he started, but Jack cut him off with a sharp look. It is exactly the time, he said, his voice hard as steel. Jack reached into his pocket, his fingers curling around the recorder. He held it up, his hand steady. I have proof of everything, he said, his voice even but his eyes burning. Every lie, every whispered promise in the dark. You thought you could hide it from me, but you forgot who I am. I am still a Marine, and I do not back down. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Emily's lips parted, her eyes wide with panic. Jack, please, she gasped, but he ignored her. He pressed play on the recorder, and the room filled with the sound of her voice, soft, intimate, undeniable. The words were a blade, cutting through the laughter and music. He will never know, Emily's voice said, raw and real. We just have to wait until he is gone again. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nick's face went white, his jaw tightening. Emily stumbled back a step, her hand covering her mouth. Jack stood there, his shoulders square, his eyes locked on her. He had given her every chance to tell the truth. Now, the truth was out, and there was no turning back. He let the silence swallow them, the weight of it pressing down on every lie she had ever told. The stunned silence that followed Jack's reveal was thicker than the humid Seattle night. Mark stepped forward, his face pale, his brow furrowed in confusion. Jack, what the hell is going on? He demanded, his voice tight. Jack turned to him slowly, his jaw set. I wish you could tell me, Mark, he said softly. Because the man you call your best friend has been sneaking around with my wife behind my back. For months. Mark's eyes widened. He looked at Emily, then at Nick, who was frozen in place like a statue. Nick, is this true? Mark asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. Nick's mouth opened, but no words came out. Emily stepped forward, her hands shaking, tears welling in her eyes. Jack, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I can explain. Jack let out a short, humorless laugh. Explain, he echoed. You think there is an explanation that could fix this? That could erase what you have done. His voice rose, the control he had fought to keep slipping just a fraction. You betrayed me, Emily. You took everything we built together and threw it away like it meant nothing. Mark grabbed Nick by the shoulder, shaking him. Tell me the truth, he barked. Nick finally met his gaze, his voice a broken whisper. It just happened, Mark. I swear, I never meant for it to go this far. Jack watched his brother's face crumble, the realization crashing over him like a wave. You were supposed to be my brother, Nick, Jack said, his voice soft but laced with steel. But you were lying to my face while you slept with my wife. The room felt small, the air thick with betrayal and pain. Emily sobbed, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Jack, I still love you, she pleaded, reaching for him. Jack stepped back, his eyes cold. Love, he said, his voice low. You do not even know what that word means anymore. The guests at the party whispered among themselves, some pulling out their phones to capture the scene unfolding. Jack could feel their eyes on him, but he no longer cared. The mission was clear. He would not let these lies stand. Emily reached for his arm again, her voice cracking. Please, Jack, we can fix this. I made a mistake. It did not mean anything. Jack turned to her slowly, his expression unyielding. It meant enough for you to keep doing it, he said coldly. And you thought I would never find out. Nick tried to step forward, But Mark pushed him back, his face twisted with fury. You were like a brother to me. Nick, Mark hissed. How could you do this? Nick had no answer, his mouth opening and closing, his eyes darting away. The room had become a courtroom, and Emily and Nick were on trial. Jack felt no satisfaction in their fear, only a hollow emptiness. You forgot who I am, Emily, he said quietly. You thought I was too busy, too far away to see the truth. But I see everything now. Emily's tears spilled over, her sobs racking her body. Jack, please, she begged. I will do anything to make this right. Jack's lips twitched, a humorless smile flickering across his face. The only thing you can do now is leave, he said firmly. The music had long since stopped. The crowd held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Jack's brother looked at him, his eyes full of shame. I am so sorry, Jack, Mark said, his voice low. I never saw it. I never thought they would do this to you. Jack put a hand on his brother's shoulder. You did not want to see it, he said quietly. But now you know. He looked at the shattered expressions of the two people who had ripped his world apart. And now it is over. Jack stepped off the stage, the microphone still echoing his final words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, tarnished marine medal his father had given him. The weight of it grounded him, reminding him that no matter how deep the betrayal, he would not be broken. Emily sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Nick stood frozen, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Mark hovered nearby, his face a mask of heartbreak and disbelief. Jack walked over to Emily, his steps slow and deliberate. He held the medal between them, his hand steady. This was my father's, he said quietly, his voice calm. He gave it to me before my first deployment. He told me it was a reminder of who I am, of what it means to stand for something, even when it is hard. Emily looked up at him, her lips trembling. Jack, I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. Jack's eyes were hard, unflinching. But you did, he said. And you did it over and over again. He tucked the medal back into his pocket and straightened, his shoulders square. You both thought I would be too busy serving my country to see what was happening here. You forgot that being a Marine means never letting your guard down, never letting betrayal slide. He turned to his brother, his voice softer. Mark, I am sorry you had to find out like this, he said. But I could not keep living a lie. Mark's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded. I get it now, Jack, he said hoarsely. I just wish it was not true. Jack let out a slow breath. We all wish that, he said. But the truth is the only way forward. He looked back at Emily, her face streaked with tears. You have lost me, Emily, he said quietly. And you have lost the man I used to be. That man died the day I saw those messages. He walked away, the crowd parting around him like the sea. In that moment, he knew he had reclaimed something precious, his own sense of honor. And no matter how much it hurt, he would not let it be taken from him again. Jack stepped back into the bright lights of the engagement party, feeling the weight of every eye on him. The whispers of the guests filled the room like a low hum, a chorus of shock and disbelief that echoed louder than the music. Emily sat frozen in a chair, her mascara-streaked cheeks glowing under the chandeliers. Mark found his place beside Jack, his expression tight with sorrow. Are you sure about this, brother? He asked, his voice low. Jack nodded, his jaw set. I have to be, he said. They thought I would be too blind to see. They thought I would be too weak to fight back. But they forgot. I am still a Marine. With that, he moved to the small stage where the microphone stood waiting. The crowd turned, the room falling into an almost reverent silence. Jack's fingers tightened around the mic, the cold metal grounding him. He took a deep breath, feeling the steel resolve in his chest. Thank you all for coming tonight, he said, his voice calm and even. I know you all came here to celebrate love, to toast the start of something beautiful. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then his eyes met Emily's across the room. But sometimes, we have to face the truth before we can move forward, he said. Because love built on lies is no love at all. A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Emily shifted in her seat, her hands twisting in her lap. Jack continued, his voice steady. So tonight, I raise a toast. Not to new beginnings, but to the end of deceit, to the end of betrayal, and to the strength it takes to stand tall when your world falls apart. He lifted his glass, his hand firm and unshaking. To the truth, he said quietly, to the strength we carry inside, even when everything else is gone. And as he lowered the glass, the room seemed to hold its breath, every soul waiting to see what would come next. Emily pushed herself to her feet, her hands shaking as she took a step toward Jack. Jack, please, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. This is not the place. Can we talk about this later? Jack's eyes flickered to her, cold and unyielding. No, Emily, he said evenly. We will not talk about this later. We will talk about it now, right here, in front of everyone you tried so hard to fool. She flinched at his words, her shoulders curling in on themselves. Nick tried to step forward, but Mark caught his arm, his face a mask of fury. You stay right there, he growled. You have done enough. Jack turned back to the crowd, his voice steady as he continued. You see, while I was overseas, fighting for this country, the woman I loved was fighting to keep her secrets. She thought she could play both sides. But she forgot. I have always known how to see past the lies. He reached into his jacket, pulling out the recorder once more. The crowd tensed as he held it up, the soft glow of the tiny screen reflecting in his eyes. This is not just a toast, he said. This is the truth you have all been denied. He pressed play, and the recording filled the room again, Emily's voice, soft and secretive. He will never know. We just have to wait until he is gone again. Nick's voice followed, low and intimate, sealing the betrayal with every word. Emily's tears spilled over, her sobs echoing off the marble floors. Jack, please, I am sorry, she gasped. But Jack did not flinch. I do not want your apologies, Emily, he said, his voice like a blade. I want the truth. And you just heard it. The room was silent, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavy in the air. And Jack stood there, tall and unwavering, the Marine who would not be broken. The recording ended, and the room was plunged into a silence so deep it felt like it swallowed every breath. Emily's shoulders shook as she clutched her hands to her chest, her tears hot and frantic. Nick stood a few steps behind her, his face pale, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Mark turned to Nick, his voice low and dangerous. How long? He asked, his fists clenched at his sides. Nick swallowed hard, his lips parting in a stutter. I do not know, months, maybe a year. His voice broke as Mark shoved him back, his face twisted with betrayal. Jack watched it all with a calm that was almost terrifying. He had faced the enemy in combat, had seen what people were capable of when pushed to their limits. But this was betrayal at its most intimate. Emily took a step toward him, her hands trembling. Jack, please, she choked out. It was a mistake. I did not mean to. Jack's eyes narrowed, his voice low and steady. A mistake is something that happens once, Emily, he said. What you did was a choice. And you chose it over and over again. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the truth settling on their shoulders like wet cement. Jack turned to them, his voice calm and sure. I wanted you all to hear it from me, he said. Because lies thrive in the dark. But tonight, we bring them into the light. He took a deep breath, feeling the finality of it settle in his chest. Emily and Nick thought they could hide this from me, he said quietly. But they forgot. I am still a Marine. I do not back down. I do not break. Emily fell to her knees, her sobs breaking the silence. Nick turned and fled the room, pushing past shocked guests who would never see him the same way again. And Jack stood taller than he ever had before, the weight of the betrayal finally lifted from his shoulders. He looked out over the room, his voice steady and calm. Now you know, he said. Now, the mission is complete. As the echo of Jack's final words settled over the room, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick and heavy in his hand. The crowd watched, eyes wide and unblinking, as he laid it on the table at the center of the room. Emily's breath caught, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "Jack, what is that?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. Jack met her gaze, his own eyes steady. "It is the truth, Emily," he said calmly. "Every message, every call, every photo you thought I would never see." He opened the envelope and began to pull out the papers inside. Phone records, bank statements, hotel receipts with Emily's name written in flowing script. The weight of them was more than just paper. It was the weight of her lies, pressed between his fingers. Mark stepped closer, his eyes scanning the papers as Jack laid them out. "You have had all this. For how long?" he asked, his voice low, almost reverent. Jack nodded slowly. "Long enough to know that this is not just a mistake. This is a pattern," he said, "and it ends tonight." Emily's knees gave out, and she sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. The guests shifted, some of them gasping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The truth was right there, laid bare in black and white. Jack's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I wanted you all to see it for yourselves," he said. "No more secrets. No more pretending." He turned to Emily, his gaze unwavering. "You thought you could keep this hidden forever," he said softly. "But you forgot who I am." He paused, letting the silence settle, then added in a voice that carried to every corner of the room, "I am still a Marine, and I finish what I start." Emily's sobs echoed through the room, but suddenly she looked up, her eyes wild and desperate. "Jack, wait. There is something else," she blurted out, her voice cracking. The guests turned, the tension snapping like a live wire. Jack's brow furrowed. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she pressed them to her stomach. "I am pregnant, Jack," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. The room fell into stunned silence. Every face turned to Emily, to Jack, waiting. Jack's chest felt like it had been hollowed out. "What?" he said, his voice low and controlled. "How long have you known?" Emily's lip trembled. "A few weeks," she whispered. "I wanted to tell you, but I did not know how. I did not know if." He cut her off, his voice calm but deadly. "If what, Emily?" he demanded. "If it is mine?" The question was a blade, slicing through the air. Emily flinched, her face crumpling. "I do not know, Jack," she sobbed. "I do not know." Mark took a step back, his face pale. The crowd around them buzzed with shocked whispers, the tension thicker than the warm air of the party. Jack felt like the ground had shifted under him, the betrayal deeper than he had ever imagined. He let out a slow breath, forcing his voice to stay even. "You did not know," he repeated. "You are carrying a child, and you cannot even tell me if it is mine or his?" Emily's tears fell harder, her shoulders shaking. "I swear, Jack, I never meant for this to happen." Jack's eyes were cold, the Marine in him taking over. "Save your breath," he said quietly. "We will find out. And if it is not mine, you will never see me again." The room erupted in low murmurs, guests shifting uncomfortably, the air electric with tension. Emily's mother stepped forward, her voice sharp with panic. "Emily, what have you done?" she hissed. Emily just shook her head, her tears blurring everything. Mark's fist clenched at his sides, his voice tight with fury. "Nick, get the hell out of here," he said coldly. Nick opened his mouth to speak, but the weight of the room pressed him down. He turned and fled, pushing through the stunned crowd. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Emily's mother turned to Jack, her face pale. "Jack, please, she is your wife," she pleaded. Jack's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "She was my wife," he said evenly. "Until tonight." He turned to Mark, his voice steady and calm. "Get her out of here," he said. Mark hesitated, but then nodded, taking Emily's arm gently but firmly. Emily looked back over her shoulder, her eyes pleading. "Jack, I swear, I still love you," she said, her voice hoarse. Jack's eyes were cold as ice. "Love is not what you showed me, Emily," he said quietly. "Love does not lie. Love does not destroy everything it touches." Emily sobbed as Mark led her away, her mother trailing behind. The room was left in stunned silence, every guest looking at Jack with a mix of pity and awe. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, the weight of the betrayal like armor around him. He took a deep breath, the scent of cologne and champagne fading in the quiet. The night had started with laughter and toasts. It ended with truth and the ruin of everything he thought he knew. Jack turned and walked to the edge of the room, his voice steady as he whispered to himself, "I am still a Marine, and I will finish this, no matter what it takes." Jack stepped outside the crowded hall, the night air cool against his flushed skin. The noise of the party still echoed behind him, muffled voices, scattered laughter that now seemed hollow and forced. He took a deep breath, his mind clear and cold. He had done what he came to do. The truth was out, the lies exposed. But he knew this was not the end. No, this was only the beginning. He walked down the path, the wet grass brushing his shoes. The streetlights cast long shadows, but Jack felt no fear. The Marine in him had always known that once a mission began, you did not walk away until it was done. And this was a mission like any other, one he would see through to the bitter end. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. He did not want to hear Emily's voice, her endless apologies. He had heard enough. Now, he needed to think. At the edge of the property, he paused, looking back at the mansion glowing with light. He could still see the silhouettes of guests moving inside, some watching him from the windows. Let them watch, he thought. Let them see that he would not be broken. He walked to his car and leaned against it, the metal cold beneath his hands. His thoughts were sharp, clear. He thought of every promise Emily had made, every smile that had hidden a lie. And he thought of the child she claimed to carry. Was it his, or another betrayal waiting to be uncovered? Jack clenched his fists, feeling the old Marine discipline settle over him like a second skin. He would get the answers. He would not rest until he knew the whole truth. And when he did, there would be no going back. The next morning dawned gray and cold, a Seattle rain tapping at the window like a steady drumbeat. Jack sat at the kitchen table, a folder of papers spread out before him. His lawyer's name was scrawled across the top, proof that this was not just a fight of the heart anymore. This was a battle for everything. He read every word carefully, his fingers tracing the lines of the divorce petition. Emily's name was there in black and white, a final severing of the ties that had once bound them. The words felt heavy, but Jack did not flinch. This was the only way forward. He signed each page with a steady hand, the pen scratching against the paper. He thought of Emily's tears, of Nick's pale face as he fled the engagement party. They had played their part in this betrayal, and now it was his turn to end it. His lawyer, a woman named Claire with a sharp mind and a colder heart, looked up at him from across the table. "You are sure about this, Jack?" she asked, her voice calm. "Once this is filed, there is no turning back." Jack met her gaze evenly. "I am sure," he said firmly. "I will not let her lies take another piece of me." Claire nodded, sliding the papers into a leather briefcase. "Good," she said. "We will also file for a paternity test. If that child is not yours, you have the right to walk away clean." Jack's jaw tightened. "I need to know," he said quietly. "For my own peace." He stood up, the weight of the decision settling into his bones. This was not just a broken marriage. It was a betrayal of every vow he had ever made, and he would not let it define him. As he walked out of the office, the rain falling harder now, Jack felt a strange sense of calm. The storm had come and gone, and he was still standing. Jack drove through the city streets, his mind focused and clear. He had never thought he would be here, fighting for the truth of his own child. But he would not let doubt or fear cloud his mission. He had to know. He pulled up outside the medical lab, the sterile building a world away from the chaos of the night before. Inside, the walls were white and cold, the air filled with the faint scent of disinfectant. Jack checked in at the front desk, his voice quiet but firm. The nurse led him to a small room, the walls lined with pamphlets and posters. Jack sat in the chair, his fingers drumming against his leg. His mind was a storm of thoughts, memories of Emily's smile, of her whispered promises in the dark. Lies, all of it. He needed to cut through them and find the truth. The nurse handed him a swab kit, her voice calm and professional. "Just a quick swab," she said gently. "We will have the results in a few days." Jack nodded, his jaw set as he took the swab, the plastic handle cold against his fingers. As he completed the test, he thought of the child growing inside Emily. If it was his, he would not turn away. He would be the father he had promised to be. But if it was not, he would walk away from her lies forever. The nurse took the sample and offered a faint smile. "You are doing the right thing," she said quietly. Jack met her gaze, his voice calm. "I know," he said. "The truth is the only thing that matters now." He left the lab and stepped out into the rain, the cold water washing over him like absolution. He felt stronger, clearer, like he was finally taking back control of his own life. As he drove away, he whispered to himself, "I will not let her lies define me. I will not let them steal my name. I am still a Marine, and I will see this through." The rain turned to a steady drizzle as Jack pulled up in front of his brother Mark's house. The warm glow from inside was a stark contrast to the cold drizzle outside. Jack took a moment, his hand on the wheel, gathering himself. This conversation would not be easy, but it was another battle he would face head-on. Mark opened the door, his eyes red and his jaw set. "Jack," he said quietly, stepping back to let him in. Jack nodded, stepping into the living room where the smell of coffee filled the air. They sat in silence for a long moment. Mark broke it first, his voice rough. "I had no idea, Jack. I swear to you, I never thought Nick could do something like that." Jack's eyes were steady, his voice calm. "I know you did not, Mark. But it happened, and we cannot pretend it did not." Mark's shoulders slumped. "He was like a brother to me. To both of us. I feel like I have been living in someone else's lie." Jack nodded slowly. "We both were," he said. "But the difference is, I am done with the lies." Mark looked down, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. Do you think you will ever forgive him?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Jack's lips pressed into a thin line. "Forgive him," he repeated. "I do not know, Mark. Some things, they cut too deep." Mark nodded, his face tightening. "I get it," he said quietly. I hate that it has come to this. I hate that he did this to you, to us." Jack reached across the table, his hand firm on his brother's shoulder. "We cannot change what they did," he said, "but we can decide how we live with it." The room fell silent again, the weight of everything pressing down on them. But Jack knew one thing. He would not let this betrayal break the bond he had with his brother. They had been through too much to let this tear them apart. Jack drove home from Mark's house, his thoughts turning in tight circles. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw Emily's car parked out front, her silhouette visible in the dim light. His heart tightened, but he pushed it down. This was no longer about love. This was about truth. Emily jumped up as he stepped out of the car, her eyes red, her hair damp from the rain. "Jack," she said, her voice small. "Please, can we just talk?" He said nothing, just walked past her and unlocked the front door. She followed, her footsteps quick on the wet pavement. Inside, the house felt cold, the air heavy with everything unsaid. "What do you want, Emily?" Jack asked finally, his voice low and even. She wrung her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I am so sorry, Jack," she sobbed. "I did not mean for this to happen. I did not." Jack turned, his eyes sharp. "You did not mean for it to happen," he said, his voice quiet but hard. "Emily, you made choices. You chose him. Over and over again. Do not stand here and tell me you did not mean it." She sank to the couch, her shoulders shaking. "I know," she whispered. "I know what I did. But I love you, Jack. I still love you." Jack's jaw tightened, his voice flat. "You love the idea of me, Emily. You love the comfort. But you did not love me enough to stay true." Emily's sobs grew louder, her hands pressed to her face. "Please, Jack. I cannot lose you. I cannot." Jack watched her for a long moment, then shook his head. "You already have," he said quietly. He turned away, his shoulders stiff. He would not let her tears weaken his resolve. Not now. Not ever again. As Jack shut the door on Emily's sobs, Nick sat alone in a cheap motel room across town, the flickering neon light outside casting long shadows on the stained carpet. He stared at the phone in his hand, scrolling through messages that now felt like poison. His mind was a mess of regret and anger. He had thought he could keep the affair a secret, that he could play both sides and walk away clean. But Jack's words at the party had cut deeper than any blade, stripping away every lie Nick had told himself about who he was. He took a swig from the cheap bottle of whiskey on the nightstand, the burn of it doing nothing to numb the hollow ache in his chest. He saw Emily's face in his mind, her tears, her trembling hands. He saw Jack's eyes, calm and cold, like a man who had faced down death and would not flinch at betrayal. Nick's phone buzzed, Emily's name flashing on the screen. He let it ring, the sound grating against his nerves. He had nothing to say to her, no comfort, no answers. He had already ruined enough lives. He thought about the job he had lost, Mark's company, the friends who had turned away in disgust. The weight of it all pressed down on him like a lead blanket. He was alone now, truly alone, and he knew he deserved it. The bottle slipped from his fingers, the whiskey pooling on the cracked linoleum. Nick closed his eyes, his thoughts swirling like the storm outside. He had played with fire, and now he was burned down to the bone. As he lay back on the lumpy motel bed, he whispered to the empty room, "I have lost everything." And in the silence that followed, he knew he was right. A few days later, Jack stood in his living room, the paternity test results in his hand. The envelope was thin, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His fingers trembled slightly as he ran them over the seal, the gravity of what lay inside pressing down on his chest. He took a slow breath and tore it open, unfolding the paper with steady, deliberate movements. His eyes scanned the words, his pulse pounding in his ears. At the bottom of the page, in clear, clinical language, was the truth. The child was not his. Jack let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding, his hands tightening on the paper until it crinkled in his grasp. He closed his eyes, the weight of it settling into his bones. He felt a hollow ache in his chest, but there was no surprise. Deep down, he had known. He set the paper down and stared at the wall, the memories of Emily's soft lies swirling through his mind. "I love you," she had whispered in the dark. "It will always be you." But it had never been him. Not really. Jack picked up his phone, dialing his lawyer with hands that were steady now. "Claire," he said, his voice even. "It is done. The child is not mine. File the final papers. I am finished with her." He hung up and stood there for a long moment, the rain pattering against the window like a quiet drumbeat. He thought about the life he had fought for, the vows he had made. He thought about how easily she had broken them. But in that moment, he felt something else too, something like relief. The last thread tying him to her had been cut. Now, there was nothing left but the truth, and the freedom to walk away, his honor and his name still his own. The next morning, Jack laced up his boots with the quiet focus of a man who had seen the worst and survived it. The house was silent, the early light filtering through the curtains in soft bands of gold. He paused for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence, a silence that felt clean, pure. He walked through the rooms of his home, each step steady, his mind clear. The photos on the walls, smiling faces, moments that had once meant everything, were a reminder of how easily the world could shift beneath your feet. But Jack did not shy away from them. He faced them head-on, just as he always had. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his marine jacket. The crisp fabric, the weight of the metals on his chest, it reminded him who he was beneath the pain. A Marine, a man who had fought for his country, and now, for himself. He looked into his own eyes, seeing the calm there, the strength that no betrayal could take. "This is not the end," he said quietly, his voice sure and even. "This is the beginning of the life I choose." Outside, the rain had stopped, the sun breaking through the clouds in soft rays. Jack stepped out onto the porch, the air fresh and cold against his face. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with it, feeling it settle deep inside. He had been tested in ways he had never imagined. But he had come out the other side stronger, more sure of himself than ever. He would carry the scars, but they would not define him. He was still a Marine, still a fighter, and no one, no betrayal, would ever take that away from him. Across town, Emily sat in her childhood bedroom, her mother's voice a constant drone in her ears. "How could you do this, Emily?" her mother asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "How could you destroy everything you built with Jack?" Emily stared down at her hands, her fingers twisting together. "I did not mean to," she whispered, her voice small. "I never meant to hurt him." Her father stood by the window, his arms crossed, his face hard. "You did not just hurt him," he said coldly. "You shamed all of us." Emily's tears fell silently, hot against her cheeks. "I loved him," she said weakly. I thought it would be different." Her mother let out a bitter laugh. "You thought you could lie forever, Emily. But the truth always comes out. And now everyone knows." The words stung, but Emily did not argue. She had seen the truth in Jack's eyes, the finality, the cold, steady calm that meant he was done. Really done. Her father turned to her, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "You need to leave him alone," he said. "You have done enough damage. Let him go." Emily's shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I do not want to let him go," she whispered. "I cannot." Her mother's eyes softened, just a fraction. "You have no choice," she said quietly. "He has made his decision. And you will have to live with what you did." Emily nodded slowly, her heart breaking all over again. She had lied. She had betrayed him. And now, she had nothing left. As she sat there in the silence of her childhood room, Emily realized that her mother was right. The truth was out, and Jack was gone. All she had left were the pieces of the life she had shattered. Jack sat on the floor of his living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. The house was quiet, the air heavy with the weight of memories he was leaving behind. Each photo he took down was another reminder of the life he had fought to protect, and the lies that had unraveled it all. He paused with one of the frames in his hand, a picture of him and Emily on their wedding day. Her smile had seemed so real then, her eyes so full of promise. But now, all he could see was the truth he had learned the hard way. With a slow breath, he set the photo face down on the table and kept packing. He filled each box carefully, methodically, like a man closing the door on the past. He had spent so long fighting for this marriage, for the family he thought they could be. But he was done fighting for someone who had never truly been his. He carried the boxes out to the car, the early morning air crisp and cold. His breath clouded in the air as he loaded the trunk, each movement steady and deliberate. He had a new apartment waiting for him, a place that was his and his alone. No memories he did not choose, no lies hiding in the corners. As he locked the door one last time, he looked back at the house that had once been a home. He felt no regret, only a quiet resolve. "I am not leaving anything behind," he said softly. "I am taking back everything that matters, my pride, my honor, my peace." And with that, he turned away, ready to start over. The next night, Jack sat across from Mark at a small diner near the water, the neon sign outside flickering in the rain. Mark stirred his coffee, his face drawn, his eyes tired. "Jack, I have to tell you something," he said finally, his voice low. Jack watched him, his jaw set. "What is it, Mark?" he asked evenly. Mark looked up, his eyes red. I think I knew," he said, his voice cracking. "Not everything, but I saw the way they looked at each other. The way Emily would disappear when Nick was around." Jack's expression did not change, but his fingers tightened around his cup. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked quietly. Mark's shoulders slumped. "I did not want to believe it," he admitted. "I thought, maybe I was imagining it. Or maybe if I ignored it, it would go away." Jack nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "You were trying to protect me," he said, his voice calm. Mark let out a ragged sigh. "I thought I was. But I should have said something. I should have had your back." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. Jack reached across the table, his voice quiet. "You are my brother, Mark," he said. "We cannot change what they did, but I know you were never part of it. Mark nodded, his eyes shining with relief. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. I needed you to hear it from me. Jack took a deep breath, the weight in his chest easing just a little. I hear you, he said. And I believe you. They sat there in the quiet diner, the rain tapping against the windows, two brothers who had faced betrayal and come out the other side still standing. It was late that night when Jack heard the knock at his new apartment door. He paused, his hand hovering over the lock. He had moved here for a fresh start. No more ghosts, no more lies. But as he opened the door, he saw Emily standing there, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes wide and terrified. Jack, she gasped, her voice trembling. I need your help. He stared at her, his face unreadable. What are you doing here, Emily? He asked, his voice cold. She stepped forward, her hands outstretched. It is Nick, she said breathlessly. He is threatening me. He says if I do not keep quiet, he will ruin me. He will ruin everything. Jack's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. What do you mean? He asked. Emily's hands shook as she reached into her bag, pulling out a small, black pistol. He gave me this, she said, her voice breaking. He said if I do not use it, he will. Jack took a step back, his marine instincts kicking in. Emily, he said firmly, put that down. She sobbed, the gun shaking in her hands. I do not know what to do, Jack, she whispered. I thought I could handle it, but he is dangerous. He is not who we thought he was. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He had known Nick was a liar, a traitor, but this was something else entirely. Emily's tears fell hard as she looked at him, her voice raw. Please, she said desperately. I need you. I do not know who else to turn to. Jack took a breath, his mind clear. He was done with her lies, but he was not done protecting what was right. Emily, he said calmly, his voice steady. Give me the gun. As she handed it to him, her hands trembling, he felt the weight of it in his palm. Cold, heavy, and final. And he knew, in that moment, the mission was far from over. Jack held the cold, black pistol in his hand, the weight of it pressing down on his palm. Emily stood there, her shoulders hunched and her eyes wild with fear. The room was filled with the tense silence of everything unsaid. Emily, Jack said calmly, his voice steady and controlled. Where did Nick get this gun? And why would he give it to you? She swallowed hard, her tears glistening in the dim light of the living room. He said I had to use it, she whispered, her voice shaking. He said if I did not, he would make me pay. Jack's fingers curled around the gun, his mind moving fast. He had seen this kind of fear before, in men cornered in battle. But this was not the desert. It was his own home, and the threat was closer than he had ever imagined. Emily, he said again, softer now. Look at me. She met his eyes, her breath ragged. Do you really believe Nick would hurt you? She nodded, her lips trembling. I know he will, she said. I know what he is capable of. Jack felt a chill settle into his bones. Nick had always been reckless, but this was something else, something dark and dangerous. You are safe here, Jack said firmly. I will not let him touch you. Emily sobbed, her hands covering her face. I do not deserve your protection, she whispered. Jack's voice was calm, but there was a steel edge to it. Deserve has nothing to do with it, he said. Right now, the only thing that matters is stopping him. He set the gun down on the table with a deliberate motion, the metal cold against the wood. He looked at her, his jaw set. You are going to tell me everything, Emily, he said. Every word, every threat. I need to know exactly what Nick has planned. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes wide and haunted. Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. Start from the beginning, he said, his voice low and even. Tell me what Nick has been doing. She took a shaky breath. It started a few weeks ago, she said quietly. After you found out, after everything fell apart, Nick showed up at my door. He said he wanted to help me, to fix what had gone wrong. Jack's jaw tightened. And you believed him? Emily's shoulders slumped, her voice small. I wanted to. I was so scared, Jack. Everything was falling apart. And he promised he could make it go away. Jack's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. What did he want in return? Emily hesitated, then whispered. He wanted me to stay quiet. He said if I told anyone what he had really done, he would ruin me. He would ruin you, too. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. What did he mean by that? He asked. Emily looked up at him, her eyes full of terror. Nick, he is not just some guy who cheated with me. He has been lying to everyone. He stole from Mark's company. Money, contracts, everything. And he thinks I know too much. Jack sat back, the pieces clicking together in his mind. Nick's affair with Emily had been more than betrayal. It had been cover for something much bigger. And the gun? He asked quietly. Emily's lip trembled. He said if I did not prove I could be trusted, he would kill me. Or make me kill you. Jack's eyes hardened. That is not going to happen, he said, his voice calm and fierce. You are safe here, Emily. And Nick, he is going to pay for everything. Jack moved through his apartment like a man on a mission, his mind laser-focused on what needed to be done. Emily sat huddled on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes never leaving him as he gathered his thoughts. Emily, listen to me carefully, Jack said, his voice calm and firm. Nick is dangerous, but he does not know what I know. And he does not know who he is dealing with. She looked up at him, her voice shaking. What are you going to do, Jack? He paused, the Marine in him rising to the surface. I am going to end this, he said evenly. But I need you to stay calm and do exactly what I tell you. Emily nodded, her breath coming in short gasps. I will, she said. I promise. Jack picked up the gun from the table, checking the magazine with quick, practiced movements. The cold weight of it was familiar in his hand, reminding him of the days he had spent overseas, when the enemy was clear and the mission was everything. He moved to the window, his eyes scanning the street below. The rain was still falling, the glow of the streetlights turning it to silver mist. If Nick comes here tonight, he said quietly, he will not get past me. Emily sobbed, her voice breaking. I am so sorry, Jack, she whispered. For everything. Jack turned to her, his eyes steady and unwavering. This is not about the past anymore, he said. This is about now, and I will not let him hurt you or me. As he set the gun down on the table within easy reach, he felt his muscles tighten, every sense alive. He had been trained for this, trained to protect, to fight. And tonight, he would use every skill he had to keep them both safe. The quiet hum of the city outside was a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in Jack's mind. But he was ready. He was still a Marine, and he would not back down. The tension in the apartment was thick as Jack moved through the darkened rooms, every creak of the floorboards a warning. Emily sat rigid on the couch, her hands clenching the blanket around her shoulders. Then there was a knock at the door, a sharp, deliberate sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Jack motioned for her to stay put as he stepped closer to the door, the weight of the gun secure in his hand. Who is it? Jack called, his voice calm but edged with steel. A muffled voice answered from the other side. Seattle PD. We got a report of a domestic disturbance. Jack's eyes narrowed. Badge, please, he said, his voice even. There was a brief pause. Then the glint of a badge flashed in the peephole. Jack let out a slow breath and opened the door. Two officers stood there, rain dripping from their jackets, their expressions serious. Sir, we got a call from a neighbor, one said, his eyes scanning the room behind Jack. They heard yelling. Everything okay in here? Jack nodded, his voice calm and controlled. We are fine now, he said. But there is something you need to know. He stepped back, the officers following him inside. Emily's face was pale as she looked up at them, her eyes wide. He threatened me, she said, her voice shaking. Nick, he gave me this. She gestured to the gun on the table, her hands trembling. One of the officers picked it up carefully, his brow furrowed. We will take this into evidence, he said. You did the right thing calling us. Jack nodded, his eyes locked on the cop's steady gaze. This is not just a domestic dispute, he said quietly. Nick is dangerous. and he is not finished. The officer nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. We will find him, he said. We will make sure he cannot hurt you again. Jack let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally easing just a fraction. The fight was not over, but tonight, he had backup. The next evening, Jack sat in his apartment, the hum of the city outside a distant echo. He had been up most of the night, his mind turning over every possibility, every angle. Emily had gone to stay with her parents for the night, safe for now. But Jack knew Nick would not give up so easily. The doorbell rang, the sudden sound slicing through the quiet like a blade. Jack moved to the door, every muscle tense. He peered through the peephole and felt his jaw tighten. Nick stood on the other side, rain-soaked and wild-eyed, his fists clenched at his sides. Jack opened the door slowly, his face a mask of calm. You need to leave, he said evenly, his voice low. Nick's eyes darted around, his voice tight with desperation. We need to talk, Jack. You do not understand. She is lying to you. Jack stepped out onto the porch, his stance solid. I understand everything, Nick, he said coldly. I understand what you have done, and I understand you are done manipulating everyone around you. Nick's lip curled, his breath steaming in the cold night air. You think you know everything? He snapped. You think you are so perfect? You are just a soldier who cannot let go of his code. Jack's eyes narrowed, his voice like ice. That code is what makes me who I am, he said, and it is why I will not let you win. Nick took a step closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. She is going to ruin everything, he said. She cannot be trusted. She never could. Jack held his ground, his voice calm and steady. I am done listening to your lies, he said. This ends now, Nick. Go before you regret it. The two men stared at each other in the cold rain, the night holding its breath. And in that silence, Jack knew one thing for certain, he would not back down. Nick's face twisted in frustration, his hands balling into fists. You think you can just shut me out, he spat. You think you can protect her from me? Jack's eyes stayed locked on his, unwavering. I will do more than protect her, he said quietly. I will end this, Nick. Whatever it takes. Nick let out a low laugh, shaking his head. You do not get it, Jack, he said, his voice almost mocking. She is poison. She will drag you down with her. She already has. Jack's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence the only answer Nick would get. The rain picked up, cold drops pounding the pavement around them. Nick took a step back, his shoulders shaking with anger. You think you are better than me, he said bitterly, but you are just a man who could not keep his wife. You are nothing. Jack's eyes flickered, but his voice stayed calm. You are right about one thing, he said softly. I could not keep her, because she did not want to be kept. And that is not on me. Nick sneered, his lip curling. You are a fool, he said, his voice tight. You are going to end up just like me, alone and hollow. Jack stepped forward, his voice low and firm. I would rather be alone than tied to a lie, he said. And I will never be like you. For a moment, they stood there in the rain, the world narrowing down to two men and the betrayal that lay between them. Then Nick turned abruptly, his shoulders hunched. This is not over, he said over his shoulder, his voice cold. I will not let it be. Jack watched him walk away into the darkness, the rain swallowing him up. He let out a slow breath, the tension coiling through his muscles finally loosening. He knew it was not over, but he also knew he was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Jack woke before the sun, the city still wrapped in the hush of dawn. He sat at the edge of his bed, his feet flat on the cold floor, his mind clear and focused. He had always been a man of discipline, a man who faced down fear and met it head on. And today would be no different. He dressed in quiet determination, each movement deliberate. His old Marine jacket still hung in the closet, the fabric worn but the meaning stronger than ever. He pulled it on, feeling the weight of it settle over his shoulders, a reminder of who he was and what he stood for. As he stepped outside, the world was waking around him. The early light caught on the wet pavement, turning the city's streets to rivers of gold. He took a deep breath of the cold morning air, feeling it fill his lungs with something sharp and clean. His phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "You good?" it read. Jack's lips curved in a faint smile. He typed back, "I am always good." Because he meant it. Whatever Nick had planned, Jack would be ready. He stopped at the edge of the street, watching the city come to life. He thought of Emily, of the woman she had once been to him. He thought of Nick, of the lies and the threats and the cold weight of the gun in Emily's trembling hands. But most of all, he thought of himself, of the man he had been before the lies and the man he was now. He was still standing, still fighting, still unbroken. Jack squared his shoulders and stepped forward, his steps sure and steady. He was a Marine. He would face this battle just as he had faced every other, head on, with everything he had. Jack spent the day making careful calls, his mind racing with the precision of a military operation. He knew Nick would not give up easily, and that meant he had to be smarter, faster, and ready for anything. Every movement was deliberate, every word spoken only after he had measured its weight. He called Mark first, his brother's voice tight with worry. "What can I do?" Mark asked, his voice low. Jack paused, then said, "Stay out of sight, but stay ready. I might need you." Mark let out a breath. "You know I have your back, Jack. Always." Jack's next call was to Claire, his lawyer, who had become more than just an ally in this fight. "He is going to try something," Jack said, his voice calm and firm. "I want every legal angle locked down, no gaps." Claire's voice was steady. "I am on it. Do not let him get in your head." By midday, Jack had gone through every document, every file Emily had given him about Nick's threats. He pieced it together like a puzzle, his mind clear. Nick was dangerous, but he was also reckless. That would be his weakness. He stood at the window of his apartment, watching the rain turn the city into a haze of light and shadow. "Nick thinks he can corner me," Jack thought, his voice in his head like a steady drum. "But I know how to set a trap." He made one last call, to the police, sharing everything he had learned. The officer on the line listened carefully, then said, "We will have someone close by. Do not do anything reckless, Jack." Jack's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Reckless is not my style," he said softly. "But I will finish this." As the sun sank below the horizon, Jack felt the tension coil in his chest. He had laid the pieces of the trap with steady hands. Now he just had to wait for Nick to walk into it. The night was heavy with rain as Jack sat in his apartment, the soft tick of the clock loud in the quiet room. He had set the trap, and now he waited, calm, focused, every sense alive. His Marine instincts had never left him, even after all these years. Tonight, they would be his greatest weapon. A soft knock echoed at the door. Jack's heart did not even skip a beat. He rose smoothly, every movement deliberate. He opened the door and found Nick standing there, his shoulders hunched, his eyes dark and restless. "Jack," Nick said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." Jack stepped back, letting him in. "Then talk," he said evenly. Nick moved into the room, his eyes flicking around nervously. "I know you told the cops," he said, his voice a snarl. "I know you think you have this under control." Jack's expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "I do have this under control, Nick," he said, "because I am not afraid of you." Nick let out a harsh laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You should be," he said. "You think you are some kind of hero, but you are just a man, and men can be broken." Jack took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "You are right," he said. "Men can be broken, but not me. Not tonight." Nick's eyes flashed with anger. "You think you are better than me?" he spat. Jack shook his head, his voice calm. "No, Nick. I just know who I am, and I know what I am willing to do to protect what is mine." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension like a live wire between them. Then Jack said quietly, "The police are already on their way. You are done, Nick. It is over." Nick's face went pale as Jack's words sank in. "You called them?" he whispered, his voice low and dangerous. Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "I called them because you crossed a line," he said. "You threatened me. You threatened her. And I will not let that stand." Nick's eyes darted around the room, his fists clenching at his sides. "You do not know what you are doing, Jack," he said, his voice a hiss. "If I go down, I am taking you with me." Jack's jaw tightened, his voice even and cold. "I have nothing to hide," he said. "You are the only one with secrets left, Nick. And they end tonight." Nick took a step forward, his face twisted with fury. "You think this is over?" he snarled. "It is never over. Not until I say it is." Jack did not flinch. "It is over," he said quietly, "because I am done letting you control this. I am done letting you control me." Nick's shoulders slumped, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "You have no idea what you are doing," he said again, but his voice was hollow now. Jack stepped closer, his voice calm and sure. "I know exactly what I am doing," he said. "I am taking back my life." In the distance, sirens wailed, a low, rising sound that grew louder with each second. Nick's eyes widened in panic, his shoulders hunched. "You think they will believe you over me?" he spat. Jack just looked at him, his voice low and final. "They already do." As the flashing lights lit up the rain-soaked windows, Jack felt a calm settle over him. This was the end he had been fighting for, the end of the lies, the end of the fear. He stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The sirens grew louder, the flashing lights casting long shadows across the room. Nick's eyes darted around, wild and frantic, but Jack stood his ground. He felt the calm of a man who had already won, who had nothing left to fear. The door burst open, two officers stepping inside, their hands firm on their weapons. "Nick Ramsey," one of them said, his voice even. "You are under arrest." Nick's shoulders slumped, his bravado gone in an instant. "You cannot do this," he spat, but his voice was weak, almost pleading. Jack watched, his face calm, his heart steady. "You did it to yourself, Nick," he said quietly. The officers moved in, cuffing Nick's hands behind his back. He struggled for a moment, then went still, his head hanging low. "You think this is justice?" he hissed at Jack as they led him to the door. Jack's voice was firm, his eyes clear. "It is the only justice there is." As Nick was led away, the door closing behind him, Jack let out a slow breath. The tension that had coiled in his chest for weeks finally began to ease. He turned to the window, watching the rain wash the city clean. Emily's face flickered in his mind, but he pushed the thought away. This was not about her anymore. This was about him, about the man he had always been, a Marine, a protector, and now, a man who had reclaimed his name. Jack's phone buzzed, a message from Mark. "Is it done?" Jack typed back, "It is done." And for the first time in a long time, he felt the truth of those words settle in his bones. It was done. He was free. The morning after Nick's arrest dawned bright and clear, the rain finally gone. Jack stood at his window, the early light washing over him like a promise. He felt the weight of it all, every betrayal, every heartbreak, fade into something quieter, something that no longer cut him open. He took a long, deep breath and let it out slowly. His reflection in the window was calm, the lines of worry and doubt finally easing from his face. He had fought his battle and won, not just against Nick, but against the ghosts of everything he had once believed. He packed the last box from his old life, moving through the apartment with quiet purpose. The Marine in him understood that sometimes you had to leave the battlefield behind to find peace. And that was what he was doing now, taking his scars and his lessons and moving forward. Emily had tried to call again that morning, her number flashing on his phone like a ghost he no longer needed to chase. He did not answer. He had nothing left to say to her. Some doors, once closed, were meant to stay shut. As he carried the box down to his car, he paused at the doorway, taking one last look around. The place that had once been a home was now just an empty space. And that was okay. He was not running away. He was reclaiming his future. The world outside was bright and full of promise. Jack stepped out into the morning light, his head held high and his heart clear. Whatever came next, he was ready. A week later, Jack met Mark at a small coffee shop near the water. The air was crisp and clean, the breeze carrying the scent of the sea. Mark sat at the table, a quiet smile on his face as Jack approached. "You look different," Mark said softly. Jack nodded. "I feel different," he replied. "I feel lighter." Mark's eyes searched his face, seeing the calm there for the first time in weeks. "You did the right thing, Jack," he said, no matter how hard it was. Jack took a sip of his coffee, his gaze steady. "It had to be done," he said. "Nick thought he could control everything. Emily thought she could lie forever. But the truth, it always finds its way out." Mark let out a slow breath, his eyes thoughtful. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Jack shrugged, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Now, I live my life. On my terms. No more shadows, no more lies." They sat in silence for a moment, the peaceful hush of the morning wrapping around them. Mark finally reached across the table, his hand firm on Jack's shoulder. "I am proud of you, brother," he said. Jack's eyes met his, a quiet strength there. "I am proud of me, too," he said softly. As they parted ways, Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of belonging that no betrayal could steal. He had lost a lot, but he had gained something even more important: himself. Jack drove out of the city, the road ahead open and clear. The sun was high, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. He rolled down the window, letting the wind rush through, feeling the freedom of it in every breath. He thought about everything he had learned, about how trust could be broken, how love could be twisted by lies, but also about how strength was not just in fighting back, it was in knowing when to walk away. As the miles rolled by, he let the past settle behind him like dust on the road. He was not running from it. He was carrying the lessons it had taught him. And the most important lesson of all, that your worth is not defined by the way others see you, but by the way you see yourself. That even when your world falls apart, you can still stand tall and start over. He found a small diner off the highway and pulled in, stepping out into the warm sunlight. The world felt alive again, every breath a reminder that he was free. He looked up at the sky, a small smile on his lips. He knew he was not alone, because there were people out there who had watched his journey, felt his pain, and cheered for his strength. People like you. So let me ask you this. What would you do if the truth shattered everything you thought you knew? Would you find the courage to stand up and start over? Tell me in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to my channel. It means the world. Let us meet again in the next thrilling, epic tale of betrayal, revenge, and the power of truth. Until then, take care of yourselves and never stop fighting for what matters most.